My problem wasn't the cancer, it was the aloneness. And if I long for anything in my life, it's connection. I'm trained as a psychologist, and I've done 2 master's degrees and a doctorate. And in all of my training, telling your own story is like a big no-no. The whole purpose of this is hopefully to help other people feel less alone in these complicated moments in our lives, where we all let go of all of that fear and bullshit and just exist together as our most authentic, flawed, gorgeous, fucked up selves. When we can be ourselves, we have the best and most perfect chance at connection. I'm Sarah Schmidt, and this is Wholey Schmidt, Season 1. Welcome back to Wholey Schmidt. I'm Sarah Schmidt. It's great to be back together with you. If you've watched a few episodes, you're probably catching on. There's a rhythm to what we're doing here. A few months ago, we recorded me telling these stories from pivotal moments in my life, and then we went back and watched them and decided that they might need a little bit of framing. That's what we're doing today, is framing this episode about motherhood. As I watched the episode back, it felt to me like so many pieces were missing. And maybe that's just because the whole concept of motherhood has literally consumed almost 30 years of my life. And I say that not as a negative, it's a positive. I love being a mother. And I've been a mother in so many different ways. And so before you watch this episode, I just want to talk a little bit about what motherhood means to me. I want to invite you to consider the role of mothers, plural, in your life, how you are mothering others, how we invite others to care/mother us, and really think super broadly about the possibility that exists in the realm of motherhood. So I have 5 children, or 5 humans that I think of as my kids, and each one of them has arrived in my life in a different way. And I've been really fortunate to experience motherhood from a lot of different angles. First, I got to be an aunt, a really terrific aunt who became a legal guardian. Second, I explored adoption. And I did that via an open adoption and a closed adoption. 2 super unique experiences of bringing an infant into our family. When I got remarried, I became a stepmom to an amazing young man, and I got to be a partner to his mom and his dad in parenting. And last, but definitely not least, at 44 years old, I gave birth to my first biological child, and I became a mother yet again. But if I think back over my whole life, I feel like I've been mothering much longer than even those 30 years. I loved being mothered. And so when my brother arrived and then my sister came home, I was thrilled to have siblings to care for. And while I definitely wasn't their mother, I definitely learned about what it means to care for another human. So I feel like one of the things I've really been gifted with is just an enormous amount of energy. And that has become a necessity in just the day-to-day life of our family. And really for me personally, mothering energizes me. Being with my children and caring for my children and doing things with my children gives me a great amount of joy. I get a huge amount of satisfaction out of it. And I even find in the hardest moments that I'm just aware that like there are lessons to be learned here. I am exploring new territory. I am modeling for them the management of stress. I'm teaching them how to deal with difficult moments in their own lives. And I really try to look at mothering through that lens. That being said, I just think it's really important to acknowledge that taking care of 5 kids isn't for everyone, and it's really not easy. So let me dive in just a little bit to some of the really unique experiences that I've had in being a mother. My first experience of motherhood was helping to take care of my then partner's niece. And we were her aunts. We were her go-to for fun, her go-to for homework help. But as she got older, it became clear that it would really be best for her to come and live with us full time. And so when she was in 7th grade, we became her legal guardians. It was a really big deal for a lesbian couple to be granted guardianship of a minor at that time. And although it didn't feel like a really big deal to us, I mean, it really felt like this was what was supposed to happen. And while there are like stark differences in terms of how each of my children came into my life, there is one thing that is consistent among all of them. And that's just my love for them and the way I think of them. For me, becoming a mother in all of these different ways never really affected the way I felt about each of these kids. It never changed the way I thought about what it meant to be a mother. It was just a different way of becoming their mom, if that makes any sense at all. And if there's any uniqueness or nuances, it really has more to do with their personalities, their unique individual needs. I mean, that's probably the trickiest piece, I think, of motherhood and mothering more than one child. It's really tending to the uniqueness of each child and being able to kind of stretch yourself thin enough, frankly, to respond to them based on their unique needs. When we all sit down at the dinner table and are in the middle of a loud, raucous, messy meal, and I look around at the 5 faces that are in front of me, I can consider how I became their mother, but really all of that becomes irrelevant when I just think about how much I love them as human beings and the bond that we share and the way I know they love me. And the how and the circumstances really fade away and become almost immaterial. Okay, so now we're going to dive into this episode, and I hope you enjoy this little bit of storytelling about how I became a mother. I don't think there's anything I could do in my life that would influence my every waking and sleeping moment like caring for a child. I think I was uniquely created to be a mom. I actually feel like when I'm with my kids, even during the hardest times and moments, I am in the right place all the time. And I'm doing what I probably was created to do best. I've had some astrology guidance suggest to me that that is spot on. But I knew that before I ever, understood those nuances. From a little girl, I knew I'd be a mom. I loved taking care of babies. I loved babysitting. I loved being with my aunts who had babies and helping them. I loved being a sister. I still love being a sister, but I took it a whole step further and really was such a mothering, smothering sister. It's something that I couldn't turn off. I couldn't turn off that part of me. When I met Julie, she was an aunt to just an amazing, adorable, precocious, delightful little girl who was living with her grandparents. And she was complicated and determined and just surprisingly self-possessed. And I was enamored and really fell madly in love with her while I was falling in love with Julie. Julie was the most committed aunt. Aunt is like not the right word, understatement, that I've ever known. And this sweet little human needed lots of support. And as we became a couple, we were there for her. And we took the role of being aunts extremely seriously. We were the weekend entertainment. We were the homework helpers. We used to joke that we had the homework hotline was our phone to the kitchen. We made cutout cookies for every holiday, that we could come up with. I have a collection of cookie cutters that's now 30 years old, and I have cookie cutters for every holiday, and I bought them to make cookies with Shayna. We made Halloween costumes. We decorated Christmas trees. We went to water parks. We took road trips. I carried her on my shoulders for not one, but 2 Lilith Fair concerts. As she grew and as our relationship fortified, it became just kind of organically clear that she should live with us. So in 7th grade, we became her legal guardians. It was a really big deal. I mean, it was a big deal to others. It just felt like, yeah, of course. So I became a mother to her. And I partnered with her other mothers, Julie and her biological mom and her grandmother, and we surrounded her with as much love and support that we possibly could. And if I know anything about how to be a parent, I think most of it I learned from her. She taught me so many things about how, parenting is not a biological, it is an earned sense of safety. And I did everything I could, and I can, continue to earn that with her. So yeah, it was just an amazing. And I wish every parent could have an experience of like that form of motherhood. I knew early on that I wanted to have children. As a lesbian couple, it was just kind of a question of like how. And in the 90s, that was not as common. I mean, it was happening, but it wasn't as common. So we spent a lot of time just in conversation and debate and negotiations around how we were gonna do that. We were worried about legally protecting our family. We didn't have a lot of role models in our immediate circle of friends and acquaintances that we could lean on for like how to do this. It just felt scary and risky to think about adoption, and then what would we be looking at, like fertility treatments or all these things. And the big question in our mind was like, how can we legally protect each other and our family and assure that this child will be not at risk of being like taken from us? This was like a real concern because it actually was happening in other places in the country at the time. Furthermore, there were very few adoption agencies that would work with a gay or lesbian couple. So I made many phone calls and was given information like, well, if one of you wants to adopt, we just won't tell the birth parents that you're a lesbian. Or if one of you wants to adopt, you could go to China and then come back and do a second parent adoption. You'll adopt as a single person, then come back and do a second parent adoption, but you can't adopt as a gay couple in China or in Guatemala or in Mexico or all these other countries, right? There was no country outside the US that would allow a gay couple to together adopt a child at the time. And all of that felt very dishonest to us and really lacked integrity. And one of the most important things I felt, and we both felt, was that whatever this little person's story was, we needed to be able to tell him or her it with just a really strong sense of right and wrong. And we did it the right way, honoring you as a human being and your birth parents as human beings. And that wasn't easy to tease out. So we actually started by trying to have a baby, right? We decided to do IVF. there's a whole thing about why we did that, right? There was a legal thing. Like if it was her egg in my body, we both had a biological link to the child, and therefore we were both legally a parent in the eyes of the law. And this child could not be taken from either one of us should one of us die. And that's why we chose that route. Those things were all in the back of our heads as we're just like thinking about, we just want to be moms. We want, we found an agency that would work with us. And they'd never worked with a lesbian couple before. It was hilarious at first. We had to help them rewrite all their paperwork. It was like mother, father. We were like, how about parent 1 and parent 2? And we tried really hard. And it was really hard on us both, and it didn't work. And it took about 1.5 years of our lives. And those were not easy months. And we both knew we'd given it a shot and we had to stop. We had met other couples who did 6, 7, 8, 9 rounds of IVF and were destroyed by it. So we weren't going to go there. I remember Julie making me promise that we wouldn't talk about being parents for 1 year after we decided to end and stop our IVF journey. And I really think probably on 1 year to the day, I opened the conversation again and said, what's next? What are we going to do now? And we knew of an agency close to us in our hometown, actually, that was working with gay couples and helping them adopt. So with all of the enthusiasm we had about parenting and our excitement about growing our family, we went to an informational session and we sat down and we saw a couple other gay couples in the room, and we started the journey of trying to adopt. After about 2 years of like classwork and paperwork and submitting tax returns and like writing your personal statement and decorating it with family photos and getting references and people coming to visit your house to determine that you are fit to care for a child, we got our home study approved and we were licensed to foster a child. And then we waited. And we waited. And we waited. And we waited. I think at the time there might have been 100 couples or families or individuals waiting to adopt. We had chosen to be part of 2 separate programs within this agency. One was like the general adoption pool, and then the other one was a specific program for African American adoption. And we felt like it was very odd to be asked to choose between these 2 programs. It almost was like asking to be, what color would you like your baby? I mean, that sounds awful, okay? It's kind of crass, but that's what it felt like. We both felt just strange about that question. Like, what do you mean? Why would I choose that? So we chose to enroll in both programs and agreed that we would let the universe decide the child that we would raise. And after about 1 year of waiting on this list and going through several rounds of birth moms choosing us and then changing their minds about whether they want to place their child for adoption, we finally got a call. And it was a lovely day in June, and I had my Motorola flip phone, and I will never forget the phone rang while I was waiting in line to buy the tickets for the 3D IMAX shark film. And our adoption counselor called me and said, we have a baby for you. It was a little boy, and he was going to be ready to go home in 36 hours. I was like stunned, just stunned. We had decided we would not have anything in our home for babies because it was just really hard after all of these efforts and trying. And I just didn't want like empty cribs and baby clothes that weren't being worn and diapers that were just sitting in piles. We didn't want any of it. So we had nothing in the house for a baby. I hustled home from Navy Pier. Julie came home from work, and I went to Babies R Us, and I proceeded to purchase everything I could possibly think you needed for a baby in about 90 minutes. Couldn't believe how much you actually need for a baby. And we drilled it down to just the essentials. If anybody ever wanted to ask me, I could give you a list of like 10 things you actually have to have, and the rest of it's total bullshit. And you can skip it because we didn't have time for it. The neighbors brought a bassinet, got the car seat in the car, and went to pick him up. It was like surreal. Oh my God, I remember the day we walked in the door. I could tell you what I was wearing. I could tell you all about the weather. I could tell you what I had for lunch. It was one of those days that it just is ingrained in me viscerally. So we took up some time and we parented and, let our family kind of adjust. And then we decided we wanted to adopt again. And we had to reopen our home study. That's a whole process. We got it approved. We got on the waiting list again. And this time, 6 months later, we got a call. And that process took a little longer. It was a little different and a little more involved and a little, just it had its own nuances, but we were a family of 3. My mom told me that when she was raising us and felt like she wasn't sure what to do or how to handle situations, she just tried to think about the things that her mother did that felt really good and good to her as a child. And she just felt like if she could just do those things, that she'd be okay. She'd do okay. And I have to say that I've probably done the same. I have just tried to be really present for my kids in however they need. And as they grow, that changes every day. But be present and share with them the things that I hope will bring them joy and help them become the best humans they can be. Put them in positions where they can learn and grow in really safe ways. I think the big gift that adoption has given me is I never had this expectation that my kids were going to be like me, because they weren't biologically me. And so I never looked at them and thought, oh, she looks like me, or, oh, he talks like me, or, oh, he's so stubborn, just like I am, or, boy, she's so organized, just like I am, or she loves math, I didn't like it. That never happened. And I mean, literally, I mean this, every day I looked at them and I thought, what are you going to tell me about yourself? Who are you? And I just feel like that would have been a gift if I could have had the same thing as a child. To not have these expectations placed upon me that I was going to be like him or her or them or, the family, or like these things or excel at these things because genetically I'm predisposed to it. Just giving them the freedom to just be who they are. As I listened back to this episode, I was really struck by even just hearing myself talk about my perspective on really trying hard to let my kids be who they really are. And adoption gave me a gift in that regard. But I want to encourage all of you who are listening today to think about how that lesson could be applied in your own parenting. I think too often the points in which we stumble as parents is when our expectations aren't met, or what we hoped might happen doesn't, for our kids and for ourselves. And letting go of that gives our kids a gift, and it gives us a gift. Expectations are dangerous in parenting, and putting them on our kids often backfires. That's just reality. But letting these little humans that we've been gifted, letting them just be and become, explore the world the way they're intuitively and intrinsically designed to explore, is not just a gift to them, it's really a gift to you. I've had more fun watching my kids explore the things that they are just drawn to. I wasn't an athlete in high school. It just wasn't something that was a high priority for our family. And I have a kid who's really good at basketball. And I love watching her play. I love it when she's just immersed in a game and taken outside of herself. I love it when she succeeds. I love it when she struggles and seeing her learn from that. That's just one example, but I learned a lot from a son who is just drawn to digital music, anything digital, frankly, and allowing him to explore all of that in ways that I think are, meaningful and safe has been a real journey for me as a parent. If you are a parent, I invite you just to think back to that moment when you had your little one out at the grocery store or a restaurant or the bank or a coffee shop, and they had a complete and total meltdown and a huge temper tantrum in the middle of the store, And your instinct was to say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry to everyone around you. And I mean, that's the starting point, really, I think, for us as parents, is to be able to let our kids just be our kids. Let them emote, let them express themselves in appropriate ways, which, let's be real, a temper tantrum for a 2 or 3-year-old is actually totally appropriate often. But as they get older, when they choose interests and choose paths that maybe we would not have chosen for ourselves, how can we remove judgment? And how can we find ways to support them? Your kids aren't going to make the choices that you made, and they're not always going to make choices that you agree with. But at the end of the day, what you really want, and I know as parents, we want this deeply, we want connection. And if you want that for your kids, then you have to support them in all the things, even the things that you might not have chosen for them. So I want to leave you with that today. And I want to invite you to join the conversation, because there's a lot to talk about here, and I don't think we're done yet. You can find more from Wholey Schmidt on Instagram and anywhere else you watch podcasts. Please consider following us at Wholey Schmidt, WHOLEYSCHMIDT.